The voice cut through the hushed, cathedral-like halls of Eastbridge Preparatory Academy, sharp enough to slice through steel. Mei Lin Zhao didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. Her tone, a precise blend of frost and steel, made the headmaster wince. "We have every available staff member searching, Ms. Zhao," Headmaster Chen said, his hands fidgeting nervously. "Security is combing the grounds as we speak." Mei Lin's gaze swept over him, dismissing him entirely as she pressed her phone to her ear. "I don't care about your procedures. I want results. This is a security failure." She paced the polished granite floor, her heels clicking like a countdown to catastrophe. Her daughter, Jia Li, had been missing for 47 minutes, vanishing somewhere between a third-period advanced mathematics class and a scheduled meeting with the guidance counselor. For Mei Lin, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech conglomerate, this wasn't just a family crisis, it was a breach in the meticulously designed world she'd built for her daughter. Across the quad, Wei Chen pushed his wheeled cart of cleaning supplies through a side entrance. The familiar scent of disinfectant and wood shavings grounded him. His daughter, 10-year-old Xiao Mei, trailed beside him, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a sketchbook tucked under her arm. This was their routine. Her public school let out an hour before his shift began, so she'd sit quietly in the break room, sketching while he prepared to erase the day's marks left by the children of the city's elite. "Looks like a storm's brewing, little one," Wei said softly, nodding toward the commotion near the main entrance. Men in suits spoke into radios, their faces tense. Xiao Mei glanced up, her brow creasing. "Is someone in trouble?" "Seems like it," Wei replied, his eyes scanning the campus. He'd worked at Eastbridge for 3 years and knew its pulse better than those who ran it. The echo of the auditorium after a concert, the distinct creak of the second-floor library window, and the countless hidden corners where a child could vanish. He spotted Mei Lin then, a hawk in a tailored suit, circling her prey. He'd seen her at board meetings and galas, a distant, commanding figure. Now, her authority was a tight coil of fury. "Stay here for a minute, okay?" Wei told Xiao Mei, parking his cart near the janitor's closet. He didn't join the official search. He didn't check the pristine lawns or the cutting-edge athletic fields. Instead, he walked past the main building, his worn boots silent on the stone path, and headed toward the old music annex, a neglected wing used mostly for storage. Descending a short flight of concrete steps, the air grew cooler, smelling of dust and aged wood. He ran his hand along a row of disused lockers and paused at a small, unmarked wooden door beneath the main stairwell, a relic from the original schoolhouse, too small for practical use, forgotten by all. Except, perhaps, a child seeking refuge. He pushed the door gently. It wasn't locked. Inside, the space was dark, cramped, and silent. For a moment, he thought he'd misjudged. Then he saw her, Jia Li, curled into a ball behind a pile of old orchestra props, her knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped so tightly her knuckles were pale. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps, a faint, panicked rhythm in the stifling quiet. Wei didn't call her name or step inside. He stood in the doorway, letting his presence register without looming. Then he backed away and spoke softly into his walkie-talkie. "She's in the sub-level storage closet, music annex." The response was swift. Within 2 minutes, footsteps echoed down the stairs. Headmaster Chen arrived first, followed by the school nurse, then Mei Lin, her face a mask of grim relief that quickly sharpened into anger. "Jia Li, come out this instant," Mei Lin ordered, her voice brooking no dissent. From inside, the ragged breathing hitched, morphing into a choked sob. The small figure curled tighter. The nurse stepped forward, her tone professionally soft but urgent. "Jia Li, dear, you need to come out. We need to make sure you're okay." It was the wrong approach, the implication of being not okay fueled the panic. A muffled whimper escaped the darkness. Mei Lin's patience snapped. "This is absurd. I'm not playing games." She moved toward the closet, ready to drag her daughter out. "Ma'am, don't," Wei said, his voice quiet but firm, halting her. She turned, her eyes blazing, ready to tear into the janitor who dared command her. But Wei wasn't looking at her, he was focused on the closet. He motioned to Xiao Mei, who had followed the commotion and stood nervously at the top of the stairs. "Hey, little one, come here a sec." Xiao Mei descended, eyes wide. Wei sat on the dusty floor, 5 feet from the closet door, leaning against the cool concrete wall. He patted the spot beside him. "Sit with your old man for a bit." Xiao Mei sat. Mei Lin watched, baffled and furious. Headmaster Chen and the nurse exchanged puzzled looks. Wei ignored them. He turned to his daughter, his voice low and steady, a calm anchor in the tense hallway. "So, tell me about that drawing you were working on today." Xiao Mei, sensing her father's purpose, opened her sketchbook. "It's a bamboo forest," she whispered, her voice a gentle counterpoint to the panicked breathing from the closet. "A bamboo forest, huh?" Wei said, eyes on his daughter. What colors are in it? Lots of green, Xiaomei said, tracing a stalk with her finger. And some yellow for the light coming through. I made the sky like it's just before night, kind of pink and purple. Twilight colors, Wei murmured. My favorite. Does it feel warm or cool? Cool, Xiaomei said. And quiet. Like the wind's just whispering through the leaves. Inside the closet, the frantic gasping began to slow. The tiny hitched breaths started to lengthen, almost unconsciously trying to match the calm, steady rhythm of Nate's voice. Avery didn't make a sound, but the terror was beginning to recede, pushed back by this strange, quiet conversation about colors and sunsets. Adriana stood frozen, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. This was illogical. It was inefficient. It made no sense. She had an entire team of psychologists on retainer, the best money could buy. She had built a life, an empire on solving problems with direct, overwhelming force. Yet here was a janitor sitting on a dirty floor, talking about a child's drawing, and he was succeeding where everyone else had failed. After a few more minutes of Nate and Maya's soft chatter, a small, pale hand appeared, gripping the edge of the closet door. Then a head with tangled blonde hair. Avery's eyes, wide and red-rimmed, darted around, skipping past her mother, past the headmaster, and landing on Nate and Maya. She didn't look at them directly, but at the space of calm they occupied. Slowly, unsteadily, she crawled out of the darkness. Not because she was ordered, not because she was coaxed, but because she was drawn toward the one source of stillness in her chaotic world. She sat down on the floor, about 10 feet away from them, and simply wrapped her arms around her knees, listening. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't tense anymore. It was settled. Nate finally looked up, his gaze meeting Adriana Locke's. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod as if to say, there, she's back. Adriana stared at him, her mind, which could process 1,000 data points in a second, struggling to compute what she had just witnessed. She saw her daughter safe. She saw the janitor who had found her. But what she couldn't comprehend, what left her standing there speechless as the world tilted on its axis, was that he hadn't just found where she was hiding. He had understood why. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sounds were the faint hum of the building's ventilation and Avery's soft, even breaths. Headmaster Thompson was the first to break the spell, clearing his throat and stepping forward with an air of restored authority. Well, he said, his voice overly brisk. All's well, that ends well. Nurse, perhaps you can escort Avery to your office. He turned to Nate, offering a dismissive nod. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Coleman. You can return to your duties. He was re-establishing the order of things. The crisis was over. The janitor could disappear again. He's not going anywhere. Adriana's voice was low, but it stopped everyone cold. She hadn't moved, her gaze still locked on Nate. She finally looked away, turning her attention to the headmaster. You and the nurse may go. I'll handle this. It wasn't a suggestion. Thompson and the nurse exchanged a look, but they knew better than to argue with the woman who had single-handedly funded their new science wing. They retreated up the stairs, leaving the four of them in the quiet hallway. Adriana's eyes fell on her daughter, still sitting on the floor, looking small and fragile. Then she looked at Maya, who was watching Avery with an expression of pure, uncomplicated empathy. Finally, her gaze returned to Nate. The questions were piling up behind her eyes, demanding answers her logical mind couldn't provide. My car will be at the main entrance in 5 minutes, she said to Nate. It was a command disguised as a statement. I want to speak with you. Nate hesitated, glancing at Maya. I have to get my daughter home. Bring her, Adriana said, already turning to walk away. 5 minutes, she didn't wait for a reply. She walked up the stairs, her posture once again ramrod straight, the CEO back in control, or at least playing the part. Nate let out a slow breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He stood, his joints protesting slightly from sitting on the cold concrete. He offered a hand to Avery. The girl flinched, but then after a long second, she looked at his callous, clean hand and tentatively took it. Her fingers were ice cold. He helped her to her feet. You okay? He asked softly. She gave a tiny jerky nod, her eyes fixed on the floor. Good, he said simply. When Adriana's sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb, Nate was waiting, holding Mia's hand. He opened the back door for Avery, who slipped inside without a word, then helped Maya in beside her. He closed the door and got into the front passenger seat. The car smelled of expensive leather and a faint, sterile perfume. It was like sitting inside a bank vault. The driver, a man with a stony face and an earpiece, pulled away smoothly. Silence stretched between them, thick and awkward. Adriana stared out the window, watching the manicured lawns of Westbridge roll by. "Who taught you that?" she asked at last, her voice devoid of emotion. "The whatever that was, the talking about pictures." Nate looked at her profile, sharp and severe against the passing street lights. "Nobody taught me. It's just something you learn." "Learn where?" she pressed, turning to face him. "What's your background, Mr. Coleman?" "It's Nate," he said. "And I'm a janitor." "I'm aware of your current employment," she said, a hint of impatience in her tone. "I'm asking what qualifies you to handle a child's panic attack better than a trained medical professional." Nate's gaze didn't waver. "My wife," he said, the words costing him something. "Before she passed, she had them, too. Bad ones. You learned that you can't charge at the fire. You have to give it a different path. Something quiet to follow until it burns itself out." The confession hung in the air, raw and unexpected. It wasn't in any file she could have pulled on him. It was human. For the first time, Adriana's corporate armor showed a crack. She looked away, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Guilt? No, that was too simple. It was the discomfort of a variable she couldn't account for. "I see," she said, though she clearly didn't. She recalibrated, returning to a language she understood. "I want to hire you." Nate blinked. "Excuse me. I will pay you a handsome consulting fee. Your job will be to be on site available for Avery should another episode occur." She was trying to put a price on it to make it a transaction. Here's the continuation of the story, adapted with Asian names while preserving the tone, structure, and themes of the original. "I'm not a therapist, Ms. Xiao," Wei Chen said firmly. "And I'm not for hire. My daughter is on the verge of expulsion," Mei Lin snapped, her frustration spilling over. "I've had her evaluated by 3 specialists. They've given her labels, generalized anxiety, school avoidance disorder, and a list of coping strategies she refuses to follow. They lecture her. But she listened to you." "I wasn't talking to her," Wei corrected gently. "I was talking to my daughter." Jiali overheard. A technicality, Mei Lin dismissed with a sharp wave of her hand. "Name your price, Mr. Chen. Everyone has one." Wei fell silent. He thought of his cramped one-bedroom apartment, the stack of bills on the kitchen counter, the constant hum of worry that shadowed him. Saying yes would be so easy. But then he glanced in the rearview mirror. Jiali was staring out the window, but Xiao Mei had leaned over, quietly showing her a drawing in her sketchbook, a picture of 2 girls, one with dark hair and one with lighter brown, standing under a sky dotted with uneven stars. "What my daughter needs isn't for sale," Wei said, his voice quiet but resolute. "She needs to feel safe. You can't buy that with a check." The truth struck Mei Lin harder than any boardroom defeat. She was a woman who could shift industries with a single email, yet she was powerless to give her daughter the one thing she truly needed. The silence in the car was suffocating. Finally, she exhaled, a sound of rare surrender. "Then what do you suggest I do?" she asked, her voice stripped of its usual command. It was a genuine question. Wei considered it for a long moment. "If I agree to help," he said slowly, "it's not a job. I don't work for you. I work for her, and it's on my terms." Mei Lin's eyes narrowed. No one dictated terms to her. But she was desperate. "Which are?" "When I'm with her, it's just me. No check-ins, no progress reports, no school administrators hovering. I'm not going to fix her. I'm just going to offer a quiet place when the world gets too loud. If she chooses to use it, she does. If she doesn't, she doesn't. That's the deal." She studied him, the janitor, the single father, the man who had just refused her money and was now setting the terms for her daughter's well-being. It was irrational. It was unheard of. It was terrifying. But the image of Jiali emerging from that dark closet, drawn to the sound of his voice, was seared into her mind. Slowly, deliberately, Mei Lin Zhao nodded. "Fine," she said, the word foreign on her tongue. "We have a deal." The car pulled up in front of Wei's modest apartment building. As he and Xiaomei got out, Mei Lin watched them. He held his daughter's hand, listening as she babbled about her day, his entire world contained in that small, precious person. Mei Lin looked at her own daughter in the back seat, still staring silently out the window, a million miles away. For the first time in years, Mei Lin Zhao felt the profound, terrifying weight of her own inadequacy. The first official day of the deal was louder than any other. For Mei Lin, the silence was deafening. She sat in her sleek, glass-walled office on the 52nd floor, the city sprawling beneath her like a chessboard she dominated. Normally, this view anchored her, a symbol of her control. Today, it felt like a prison. She had received one text from the school: Jiali is in attendance. Nothing more. No data, no updates, no metrics to measure success. She had relinquished control of her daughter's well-being to a janitor, and the uncertainty clawed at her. Her thumb hovered over Headmaster Chen's contact, her mind demanding a status report. Is she in class? Has she had an episode? Has she spoken to him? But she'd made a deal. Her word in business was ironclad. She let her hand fall, the inaction feeling like a betrayal. At Eastbridge, the 10 a.m. bell rang, sharp and jarring, signaling the end of second period. For Jiali, it was a gunshot. The scrape of 25 chairs against linoleum, the burst of chatter, the sudden crush of bodies in the hallway, it was overwhelming. Her history teacher, Ms. Liang, was returning yesterday's quiz. As a paper landed on Jiali's desk, she saw the grade in stark red ink, B+. For most students, it would be a triumph. For Jiali Zhao, daughter of Mei Lin Zhao, it was a klaxon, a flaw, a fracture in her foundation. The red ink seemed to throb. The hum of the fluorescent lights swelled into a roar. Her vision blurred at the edges, the room tilting. You're not good enough. She'll be disappointed. Failure. The word screamed in her mind. Her heart pounded, her breath caught. I can't be here. She stood abruptly. Ms. Liang looked up, startled. Jiali, is something wrong? I need to use the restroom, Jiali stammered, the lie bitter on her tongue. She didn't wait for permission, fleeing the classroom, leaving the red-marked paper behind like evidence of her shame. But she didn't go to the restroom. She walked, then half-ran through the hallway, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floors. She passed the library, the nurse's office, all the designated safe zones. Down one flight of stairs, then another, she followed the path she'd seen the janitor take, descending to the basement level. The air was different here, cool, smelling of old paper and cedar-scented cleaner. It was quiet. She found his office, the door propped open with a rubber wedge. The room was small, cluttered, and comfortingly ordinary. A metal desk was buried under catalogs for industrial cleaning supplies. A pegboard held rows of labeled keys. In the corner, on a wobbly table, Xiaomei sat drawing, her tongue peeking out in focus. Wei was at a deep utility sink, methodically polishing a set of brass sconces from the main hall. He looked up as Jiali appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her breathing shallow. He didn't seem surprised. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't say anything. He simply dried his hands on a rag, picked up a clean, soft cloth, and held it out to her. The secret to brass, he said, his voice calm and steady, is you can't rush it. Small circles, same direction, over and over. He handed her a tarnished brass plate from a doorknob. Jiali stared at the cloth, then at the piece of brass. It was a simple, grounding task, no grade, no judgment. She took them without a word and sat on a stool near the wall, away from the door. Her movements were tentative at first, then settled into the steady, circular rhythm Wei had described. Xiaomei looked up from her drawing and offered Jiali a small, shy smile before returning to her sketchbook. The room was filled with only the soft scratch of Xiaomei's crayons on paper and the gentle, rhythmic scrape of cloth against brass. Wei resumed his work, the two of them polishing their separate pieces in a shared, comfortable silence. Jiali focused on the circle in her hand. The warmth of the metal seeped into her fingers. The repetitive motion became an anchor, a quiet mantra for her hands that silenced the chaos in her mind. The roar of the fluorescent lights upstairs faded. The red B+ on her quiz lost its sting. There was only the circle, the pressure, the slow reveal of gleaming metal beneath the tarnish. After 10 minutes that felt like an hour, and an hour that felt like 10 minutes, she stopped. The brass plate in her hand shone like a polished coin. It's loud upstairs, she whispered to the wall, her first words. Wei paused, turning to look at her. He nodded simply. Yeah, he said. It can be. He didn't ask why. He didn't offer fixes. He just agreed. That simple validation carried more weight than any therapy session Jiali had endured. It was the truth, it was loud upstairs, and down here, it was quiet. He glanced at the round clock on the wall. Bell for fourth period is in 5 minutes. He wasn't pushing her to leave, just giving her the information, leaving the choice to her. Jiali took a deep breath, the first full, steady one she'd managed all day. She placed the polished brass plate on the edge of his desk. Thank you, she said softly. Anytime, Wei replied. She slipped out as quietly as she'd come. As she climbed the stairs, the sounds of the school returned, distant chatter, the clang of a locker, but it was different now. The volume had been dialed down. The noise was still there, but it no longer felt like it was inside her. She had a place to put it, a secret haven hidden in the basement, in a cluttered room that smelled of cedar, where no one asked her to be anything other than herself. The The quiet lasted 3 days. 3 days in which Mei Lin Zhao adhered to the terms of their deal with a discipline that felt almost painful. Each morning, she received a single automated text from Eastbridge, Jiali Zhao, present. She forced herself to interpret the lack of news as good news. At her company, she finalized a 9-figure deal with a Singaporean tech firm, her focus as sharp as ever. But beneath it, a low hum of anxiety persisted, a glitch in her system, an element she couldn't control. That Friday, she returned to her penthouse apartment, a sleek expanse of white walls, polished concrete floors, and floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the city like a command center. It was a space designed to inspire awe, but it felt sterile, empty of warmth. Jiali arrived an hour later, dropped off by the private driver. She set her bag by the door, her movements less guarded than usual. "How was your day?" Mei Lin asked, her standard opening, eyes still on the tablet where she reviewed quarterly projections. "Fine," Jiali said. Usually, fine was a barricade, a curt syllable meant to shut down conversation. Today, it sounded different, just fine, a simple fact. "Did you get the review sheet for your history midterm?" Mei Lin pressed, moving to the next item on her mental checklist. "Yes. Your tutor will be here at 7 o'clock to go over it." Jiali nodded and headed to her room. Mei Lin looked up, a faint frown creasing her brow. There was no argument, no exasperated sigh. The usual tension was gone, replaced by an unsettling calm. Something had shifted in her daughter, but Mei Lin had no data to quantify it. It was a change she could sense but not measure, and it drove her to distraction. 20 miles away, in a small 2-room apartment fragrant with ginger and sizzling soy, a different kind of quiet settled. It was the warm quiet of home. Wei stood at the stove, stirring a pot of noodle soup, while Xiao Mei sat at their small kitchen table, carefully coloring a drawing. "Think we need more scallions?" Wei asked, holding out a spoon for her to taste. Xiao Mei took a cautious sip. "Needs more everything," she declared with the seriousness of a Michelin-starred chef. Wei laughed, a warm sound that filled the modest space. "More everything, huh? You're a tough critic." He sprinkled in a pinch of spices, his movements easy and unhurried. This was his world, simple, contained, and brimming with a love so palpable it lingered in the air. The next week, Mei Lin did something she hadn't done in years. She cancelled her 4 p.m. meeting and instructed her driver to take her to Eastbridge. Her excuse, even to herself, was thin: she wanted to pick up Jiali personally. The truth was, she needed to see it for herself. She needed to understand the variable named Wei Chen. She arrived as the final bell rang, the campus erupting into the organized chaos of dismissal. She stayed in her car, watching. Jiali emerged from a side door, not alone. Wei was with her, pushing his cart of supplies, Xiao Mei skipping alongside. Mei Lin watched as Jiali held up a piece of paper, showing it to Wei. He stopped, leaned in to look, and smiled, a genuine smile, not the guarded one he'd given her. Mei Lin saw something that made her breath catch. Jiali smiled back, not a wide grin, but a small, genuine curve of her lips, a fleeting expression Mei Lin hadn't seen in years. It hit like a quiet, devastating blow. Her daughter was happy, standing in a parking lot with a janitor and his child. Steeling herself, Mei Lin stepped out of the car. The three of them looked up as her heels clicked on the asphalt. "Mom," Jiali said, her smile vanishing, her posture stiffening. "Mei Lin," Wei said, his tone neutral, offering a slight nod. Xiao Mei peeked out from behind her father's legs, clutching her sketchbook. Mei Lin's gaze fell on Xiao Mei. "Hello," she said, her voice softer than intended. She nodded toward the sketchbook. "I hear you're quite the artist." Xiao Mei blushed, stepping slightly forward. "I just like to draw." Mei Lin looked at Wei, then at Jiali, who was now staring at her shoes. An impulsive thought surfaced, and before she could stop it, she spoke. "You two should come over for dinner." The silence that followed was heavy with the unspoken divide between their worlds. Wei's eyes widened faintly. He glanced from the sleek, expensive car to the woman who owned it, then to Xiao Mei's hopeful face. "That's very kind, Ms. Xiao," he said, his polite refusal taking shape. "But we couldn't impose. We have plans." "We do," Xiao Mei whispered, her wide eyes pleading. Mei Lin saw her chance. She knelt, an unfamiliar gesture that made her knees protest, until she was eye level with the girls. "I was hoping you could show me some of your drawings, Xiao Mei. And Jiali could show you her calligraphy sketches." Jiali's head snapped up. Her mother rarely mentioned her sketches. She glanced at Xiao Mei, a flicker of hope in her eyes, a silent, desperate plea shared between the two 10-year-olds. Wei saw it, the longing in his daughter's face for a new friend, the fragile hope in Jiali's expression. He was cornered. Saying no would protect him from this formidable woman, but it would crush the spirits of two children with so little to hold on to. He let out a slow breath, a quiet surrender. "Okay," he said. We'd like that. Mei Lin stood, a spark of triumph in her eyes, quickly hidden. Tomorrow, then. 6 o'clock, she gave him the address, a string of words that signified one of the city's most exclusive buildings. As she returned to her car, leaving them in the parking lot, the weight of her decision settled in. She had invited her janitor and his daughter for a playdate in her cold, pristine penthouse, a collision of worlds she was utterly unprepared for. As Wei looked at Xiao Mei's beaming face, a knot of dread tightened in his stomach. He had just agreed to step into the lion's den. Is this a hotel, Dad? Xiao Mei whispered, her voice barely echoing in the vast lobby. The floors gleamed like polished obsidian, the walls adorned with stark, angular artworks that seemed to pulse with intensity. A man in a crisp gray suit stood behind a desk that looked carved from glass. Wei squeezed her hand. Nope, it's an apartment building. People live here? Xiao Mei asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. Wei chuckled softly. Some people do. Their names were announced in a hushed tone over an intercom, and moments later, the elevator doors slid open silently. The ride to the penthouse was so smooth it felt like floating into the clouds. When the doors opened directly into Mei Lin Zhao's apartment, Xiao Mei gasped. The entryway framed a wall of glass, the city sparkling below like a sea of stars. The space was vast, furnished with sparse, precise pieces, an angular leather sofa, a single steel chair, a glass table, that felt more like museum exhibits than furniture. Mei Lin stood in the center of the room, looking as out of place as they felt. She wore tailored black trousers and a silk blouse the color of ivory, likely worth more than Wei's monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back, but a few strands had escaped, a small sign she wasn't entirely in control. Jia Li stood slightly behind her, hands clasped tightly, eyes darting anywhere but at them. You're here, Mei Lin said, the words lingering awkwardly. We're here, Wei confirmed, resisting an urge to bow. Thanks for having us. An uneasy silence settled. Wei cleared his throat. Mei Lin smoothed her already impeccable blouse. Then Xiao Mei, ever the peacemaker, broke the tension. She stepped toward one of the towering paintings. That one looks like a stormy wave, she said to no one in particular. Jia Li let out a small, stifled giggle, quickly covering her mouth as if she'd broken a rule. Mei Lin glanced at the painting, then at Xiao Mei, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. It's a Zhang Wei, she said. It's about the fragmentation of identity. Oh, Xiao Mei said, nodding solemnly. Well, its identity looks stormy. The honesty cracked the tension. Jia Li took a tentative step forward. I can show you my room if you want, she offered quietly to Xiao Mei. Xiao Mei's face lit up. Okay. The two girls, bound by a shared need to escape the awkward adults, hurried off down a long, pristine hallway. Left alone, Wei and Mei Lin stood in the vast, silent room. Can I get you something to drink? Mei Lin asked, moving toward a kitchen so sleek it looked untouched. Water's fine, thanks, Wei said. She retrieved a bottle of sparkling water from a stainless steel refrigerator and poured it into a heavy crystal glass. She handed it to him, their fingers brushing for a fleeting moment. The silence stretched again. I had dinner brought in, Mei Lin said, gesturing toward the dining area where a long glass table was set with pristine white plates. I hope that's all right. Dinner was an exercise in quiet bewilderment. Small, meticulously arranged portions of food Wei couldn't identify were served by a silent woman in a gray uniform who appeared and vanished through a hidden door. Wei and Xiao Mei exchanged covert, wide-eyed glances over what looked like a single piece of tuna in a swirl of yuzu foam. Wei noticed Mei Lin watching him, her expression analytical, as if trying to decode a complex algorithm. He decided to meet it head-on. This is a long way from noodle soup, huh? He said with a small, self-deprecating smile. Mei Lin blinked. I can have my chef prepare that next time, if you prefer. That's not what I meant, Wei said gently. This is lovely. It's just, different. She nodded, though he wasn't sure she grasped it. Mei Lin solved problems with resources. If he didn't like the food, she'd simply order different food. The idea of a shared, messy family meal seemed like a foreign concept to her. After dinner, the girls reappeared. Can we go draw in my room? Jia Li asked her mother, the first request she'd made all evening. Of course, Mei Lin said, a hint of surprise in her voice. The girls vanished, their soft giggles echoing down the hall. The silence that followed was heavier. Mei Lin walked to the glass wall, staring out at the city's glittering skyline. The school reports no further incidents, she said, her back to him. That's good, Wei replied. What do you do with her? She asked, turning to face him. In the basement. What's your method? Wei took a sip of water. We don't have a method, Mei Lin. Using her first name felt like a quiet defiance. She came down. I gave her something to do with her hands. We sat in the quiet. That's all. Mei Lin's brow furrowed. It can't be that simple. My company builds predictive models based on billions of data points. Human behavior follows patterns. There must be a technique. Maybe the technique is not having one, Wei suggested. Maybe it's just being there, not expecting anything. She crossed her arms, a familiar defensive stance. I'm always there for her. I provide everything, this school, the tutors, the calligraphy lessons. I built this world so she'd never have to struggle. Wei's voice was soft but precise. Kids don't need you to build a world for them. They just need you to sit in theirs for a while, even if it's small or messy or doesn't make sense. Mei Lin stared at him, her carefully curated composure wavering. He wasn't just talking about Jiali anymore, he was talking about her. Before she could respond, laughter, real, unrestrained laughter, drifted down the hall. Jiali and Xiao Mei ran into the room, holding up a large sheet of drawing paper. In a vibrant burst of crayon, it depicted two figures, a majestic horse and a small, smiling brown mouse perched on its back. Jiali taught me how to draw a horse, and I taught her how to draw Xiao Shu, Xiao Mei announced proudly. Xiao Shu is the hero of Xiao Mei's stories, Jiali explained to her mother, her voice lit with a warmth Mei Lin hadn't heard since she was a toddler. Mei Lin looked at the drawing, the chaotic, joyful, imperfect collaboration between their daughters. She saw Jiali's shining eyes. Her life had been measured in stock prices, market dominance, and flawless execution, but this messy crayon drawing felt more valuable than anything her company had ever produced. As Wei and Xiao Mei prepared to leave, Jiali shyly handed the drawing to her mother. This is for you, she said. After they left, Mei Lin stood alone in the vast, silent penthouse. The silence felt different now, not sterile, but a void aching to be filled. She looked at the drawing in her hand, the bold horse and the tiny mouse riding together. A warmth spread through her chest, unfamiliar and raw. It was hope, and it was terrifying. The weeks that followed found a fragile rhythm. Jiali no longer needed to flee a classroom to find quiet. Sometimes, between periods, she'd slip down to the basement, and Wei would glance up from his work and nod. He never asked why she was there. He'd hand her a rag to polish brass fittings or let her watch as he carefully repaired a torn library book with binding glue. Jiali and Xiao Mei began a secret project, a comic book series about Xiao Shu the mouse and her mighty steed, named Tianma. They'd sit at the wobbly table in Wei's office, heads bent together, one drawing panels, the other carefully lettering speech bubbles. For Jiali, these stolen 15-minute moments were the only times she wasn't performing. She wasn't Jiali Zhao, the prodigy with the CEO mother. She was just Jiali, the girl who drew horses. Mei Lin noticed changes her spreadsheets couldn't capture. Jiali started talking at the dinner table, not just about school, but about Xiao Shu and Tianma's latest adventure. One evening, Mei Lin came home to find Jiali in the living room, surrounded by colored pencils, trying to draw a mouse that didn't look like a dumpling. Mei Lin lingered in the doorway, watching, a silent witness to her daughter's tentative return to the world. She had the crayon drawing of the horse and mouse framed and placed on her office desk, a vibrant rebellion amidst the steel and glass. But such an unconventional arrangement couldn't stay hidden forever. Eastbridge's Whisper network was more efficient than any corporate intelligence firm. It began with a teacher noting Jiali had missed a quiz. Then a parent, whose son was competing for top rank in the math Olympiad, remarked that Jiali Zhao seemed to be getting special treatment. The final straw was when a board member's daughter saw Jiali emerging from the janitor's office in the basement. The call from Headmaster Chen was polite but firm. Mei Lin, we need to have a chat. In my office, if you would. The headmaster's office was a temple of tradition, dark wood, leather-bound books Mei Lin doubted he'd ever read, and a massive desk that served as a fortress. Chen steepled his fingers, his face a mask of practiced concern. Mei Lin, we have a situation, he began. Mei Lin saw the vulnerability in his eyes, a quiet resignation that mirrored her own turmoil. But Wei didn't lash out or panic. He simply nodded, absorbing the blow like he had so many others in his life. I figured this might happen, he said quietly, his voice steady but laced with regret. He glanced at the wobbly table where Jiali and Xiao Mei had spent so many afternoons, their comic book pages scattered like forgotten treasures. Institutions like this, they don't like things they can't control. Mei Lin stepped inside, closing the door behind her. For the first time, she felt out of place in her own power, her tailored suit and commanding presence clashing with the humble clutter of mops, cleaning supplies, and children's drawings taped to the walls. What do we do? She asked, the words foreign to her. She wasn't used to seeking advice, she gave orders, made decisions that shaped empires. But here, in this basement sanctuary, her strategies felt inadequate. Wei rubbed his hands together, calloused from years of manual work, and let out a slow breath. We talked to Jiali. This isn't just about us, it's her life they're playing with. That evening, Mei Lin picked up Jiali from school without a word about the ultimatum. They drove in silence to Wei's apartment, a modest building tucked in a bustling neighborhood where the air smelled of street food vendors and evening rain. Xiao Mei opened the door, her face lighting up at the unexpected visitors, but sensing the tension, she quietly led Jiali to her room to continue their comic. In the small living room, surrounded by mismatched furniture and the faint aroma of brewed tea, Mei Lin and Wei sat across from each other. She explained the situation again, this time with less clinical detachment, her voice cracking slightly as she described the board's threat. Wei listened, then leaned forward. "I've been thinking," he said. "There's a public school near here, good teachers, smaller classes. It's not elite, but it's got heart. Jiali could transfer. No pressure, no optics. Just a place to learn and be a kid." Mei Lin's eyes widened. The idea was radical, a step down from the world she'd built. But her future, the connections, the prestige. Prestige didn't make her happy, Wei countered gently. "Look at her now, in there with Xiao Mei. That's real. You can't buy that." As if on cue, laughter bubbled from the bedroom, Jiali and Xiao Mei's voices mingling in excited chatter over their drawings. Mei Lin closed her eyes, the sound piercing her defenses. For the first time, she saw the third option not as a compromise, but as a liberation. The next day, she marched back into Headmaster Chen's office, her resolve like steel. "I've made my decision," she said, placing a formal letter on his desk. It outlined Jia Li's voluntary withdrawal from Eastbridge, effective immediately. Chen's face paled. "Mei Lin, think this through. Your family's legacy here." "My family's legacy is my daughter," she interrupted. "And she'll build her own, on her terms." As they left the school for the last time, Jiali walking between Mei Lin and Wei, with Xiao Mei skipping ahead, Mei Lin felt a weight lift. The world ahead was uncertain, messy, and uncharted, much like a crayon drawing of a horse and a mouse. But for the first time, it felt like home. In the months that followed, Jiali thrived at the new school. She made friends, joined an art club, and continued her comic series with Xiao Mei. Wei and Mei Lin's worlds intertwined more, dinners that mixed noodle soup with gourmet touches, quiet evenings where conversations flowed without agendas. Mei Lin even started drawing with the girls, her lines tentative at first, then bolder. And in her office, amid the chrome and glass, the framed drawing remained, a reminder that sometimes, the greatest success comes from letting go of control. "I see," Wei said softly, running a hand over his face. His expression carried a quiet regret, a weight he bore without complaint. "I was afraid something like this might happen. I'm so sorry, Mei Lin. The last thing I wanted was to cause trouble for Jia Li." "It's not your fault," Mei Lin said, her words sharp with unexpected ferocity. He shook his head. "Doesn't matter whose fault it is. This is how the world works." He stood, shoulders slumping with resignation. "Tell Headmaster Chen he doesn't need to worry. I'll stay away from Jia Li. I won't even look her way. It'll be like I don't exist. She'll be upset for a bit, but she's strong. She'll be okay." Wei was offering her option A on a silver platter, taking the blame, erasing himself to protect his job and Jia Li's future. It was the clean, logical solution. But hearing him say it ignited a white-hot rage in Mei Lin's chest, not at him, but at the system, at Chen, at herself. Erase the problem. Make it disappear. It was the mantra she'd lived by, the way she'd handled Jia Li's struggles for years, suppressing the messy emotions, ignoring the inconvenient pain. Hearing Wei offer to do the same shattered something inside her. "No," she said, her voice trembling with intensity that startled them both. Wei looked at her, confused. "No," she repeated, stepping fully into his office, into his world. "You are not going to disappear. You're not the problem, Wei. You're the only thing that's working." She took a breath, her decision solidifying. "If they have a problem with you, they have a problem with me, and they have no idea what a problem I can be." Wei stared, speechless. The untouchable CEO was declaring war on her own institution, for him, for her daughter, for what was right. "Mei Lin, Jia Li's future," he began, but she cut him off. "Her future is a life where she isn't afraid to breathe. A life where she knows she has a safe place to land. That's the future I'm fighting for. Eastbridge is just a building. What you've given her, that's a foundation." The air between them crackled. The divide of CEO and janitor dissolved. They were two parents, allies united against a common threat. "So, what do we do?" Wei asked, his voice low. Mei Lin's mind shifted into gear, not with scenarios of defeat, but with strategies for battle. "The board meeting is in 3 days. They expect me to comply." A slow, dangerous smile curved her lips. "I'm not going to comply. I'm going to change the rules." "They won't listen to reason," Wei cautioned. "They're worried about liability, optics. Then we don't give them reason, Mei Lin said, her eyes landing on the comic book pages scattered across Xiao Mei's table, the bold horse and the tiny mouse. We give them proof. She looked at Wei, a plan forming, audacious and terrifying. You said they need to sit in her world. What if we make them? Wei met her gaze, seeing not just the titan of industry, but a protector. For the first time since this began, he felt a spark of hope. Okay, he said, a slow smile spreading. Let's make them. The 3 days before the board meeting were a whirlwind of covert preparation. Mei Lin Zhao, for the first time in her career, worked against the system she knew so well. Her office became a war room, not for corporate conquest, but for a battle against ignorance. She didn't call lawyers, she called AV specialists, arranging a discreet installation in the boardroom, immersive audio and dynamic lighting, invisible until she gave the signal. Wei's task was more delicate. He found Jiali and Xiao Mei in their basement nook and sat with them. Some grown-ups who run the school, he began gently, don't understand what helps kids feel safe. We thought, instead of telling them, we could show them. He asked if they'd build a model of the school, not how it looked, but how it felt. A spark lit in Jiali's eyes. It was a language she spoke, a way to tell her story without words. That evening, Mei Lin's sterile penthouse transformed. Poster boards, paint jars, and calligraphy brushes littered the polished floor. When she came home, she found Wei on his knees, helping Xiao Mei craft a paper bamboo grove, while Jiali painted a classroom in chaotic, jarring red. Without a word, Mei Lin shed her blazer, kicked off her heels, and joined them on the floor. What do you need? She asked softly. For 2 days, they worked, the CEO and the janitor alongside their daughters. They built the East Bridge of Jiali's mind, distorted hallways, a gymnasium swirling with loud colors, and, in the center, Wei's office, painted a warm, soft yellow with a tiny LED glowing steadily within, an island of calm in a sea of chaos. The night before the meeting, with the diorama complete on the glass dining table, Mei Lin and Wei stood on her balcony. Are we insane? She whispered. Wei smiled. Probably. But we're in it together. She looked at him, vulnerable. I'm scared. Me too, he admitted. The shared fear forged a bond stronger than any contract. The next morning, they stood outside the polished teak doors of the Eastbridge boardroom. Mei Lin wore a tailored dress in a quiet but commanding shade of jade. Wei stood beside her in a pressed collared shirt, a small remote tucked in his hand. Inside were the people who held their children's futures. Behind them, under a sheet, was the messy, beautiful diorama of a little girl's heart. Mei Lin took a steadying breath, met Wei's gaze, and nodded. She pushed open the doors, and they walked in. The boardroom was a fortress of dark wood and silent judgment. The 8 board members sat like statues around the polished table. Headmaster Chen, at its head, called the meeting to order with cold formality. Thank you for coming, Mei Lin, Headmaster Chen said, his tone brooking no argument. As you know, the board has reviewed the situation with your daughter and upheld my recommendation. This meeting is to confirm that you have terminated the unauthorized arrangement with Mr. Chen. He nodded curtly toward Wei, who stood near the door, a quiet presence in their world of privilege. All eyes turned to Mei Lin. They awaited her capitulation. She stood, her calm commanding the room. I cannot confirm that, Jian, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. What I can do is show you why. She gave a subtle nod to Wei. He pressed the button on the remote in his hand. The room plunged into a disorienting twilight. A distorted school bell blared from hidden speakers, startling several board members. A chaotic murmur of overlapping whispers filled the air. Did you see her test score? She's so strange. Failure. As the lights flickered in a harsh, buzzing rhythm. The fortress had been breached. As the board members exchanged confused, indignant glances, Wei stepped forward and unveiled the diorama, placing it at the center of the table. In the dim, unsteady light, its single glowing basement room shone like a defiant beacon. This is Eastbridge Academy, Mei Lin's voice cut through the noise, resonant and powerful. She gestured to the model, its jarring red classrooms, its twisted hallways. This is what your pursuit of excellence feels like to a child terrified of imperfection. This is the noise in her head every day. The board was ensnared, trapped in the sensory storm she'd created. We tried your approved methods, she continued, her gaze sweeping their stunned faces. Specialists, strategies, they only added more noise. She pointed to the glowing spot on the table. As she did, the chaotic sounds faded, replaced by the soft, clear voice of Xiao Mei, describing the colors of a bamboo forest at twilight. And this, Mei Lin said, her voice softening, is where she found silence. Not in a designated wellness center, but in a janitor's office, with a man who asked nothing of her. He gave her a safe harbor in the storm. The audio faded into absolute silence. The only light was the warm, steady glow from the tiny office on the table. Mei Lin met each board member's eyes. I'm not asking you to break your rules for my daughter. I'm asking you to be brave enough to admit your rules aren't enough. Her voice rose with conviction. I'm asking you to see the wice of this world not as liabilities, but as your greatest untapped asset. I'm asking you to build more of these. She tapped the glowing room. More quiet places, more humanity. Jia Li's future isn't at stake today, it's the soul of this school. She sat down. The silence in the boardroom was profound, a silence of shock and revelation. The 8 most powerful people at Eastbridge stared at the messy, beautiful diorama, their eyes fixed on its single point of light as if it were the only thing in the world. The silence was broken by Li Huazhang, the board's most imposing member. She removed her glasses, her composure visibly shaken. My granddaughter was a student here, she said, her voice quiet but heavy with years. Valedictorian. She left her university after 1 year. She said she never learned how to find peace after the pressure stopped. She looked at Mei Lin, her eyes glistening. You didn't just show us Jia Li's world. You showed me my granddaughter's. Li Hua put her glasses back on, her resolve reignited. I move that we table any discussion of Jia Li Zhao's enrollment indefinitely. I further move that this board fund a new student wellness initiative, developed and piloted by Mr. Chen under Ms. Zhao's direct sponsorship. Before a stunned headmaster Chen could protest, hands rose around the table. The vote was unanimous. Walking out of the boardroom, Mei Lin felt the weight of the world lift. Wei was beside her, and she reached for his hand, their fingers lacing together naturally. We did it, she whispered, her voice thick with disbelief and gratitude. No, Wei said softly, a proud smile on his face. You did it. 6 months later, the basement room was no longer a closet but a sanctuary called the Quiet Room. Its walls were adorned with murals of starlit bamboo groves, the floor covered with soft rugs and beanbag chairs, the air imbued with peace. Wei, no longer in a janitor's uniform, was its full-time director. He sat on the floor, helping a young boy glue a torn book page, when the door opened. Jia Li stood there, a confident, radiant version of herself. She wasn't a visitor today, she was a volunteer. She gently guided a nervous new student toward the art supplies. It's okay to feel shaky, she told the girl. This is a good place for shaky days. Mei Lin arrived moments later, not as a CEO but as a mom, wearing jeans and a soft sweater. She went straight to Xiao Mei, curled in a reading nook, to ask about Xiao Shu and Tianma's latest adventure. Later, the 4 of them stood before the last blank wall, paintbrushes in hand, ready to create a mural of a sprawling twilight forest. Mei Lin laughed as her attempt at a cloud came out lumpy and gray. Wei stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, guiding her hand. Don't try to control it, he whispered in her ear. Let it be what it wants to be. She leaned back against him, a wave of pure, uncomplicated joy washing over her. She looked at her daughter, laughing with her best friend, and at the man she loved. Her world was no longer a sterile penthouse but this small, messy, beautiful room. It was full. It was home. If this story reminded you that the quietest acts of kindness can make the loudest impact, we'd love to know. Where in the world are you reading from? Share in the comments below. We read every one, and it means the world to see how far these stories travel. If you believe empathy is a superpower, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Stay kind, keep listening, and until next time, let's keep building quiet places together.